Hello everyone, Mattlesburger here with Levelhead. I started playing Levelhead a little over a week ago and became almost immediately hooked. I've always been attracted to games with level editors, going back to things like Lode Runner and Boulder Dash that I played back in the 80s and 90s, so when I heard about a modern PC game based around the idea of creating and sharing user levels, I knew I needed to check it out. And I have to say that Levelhead has delivered the goods real good in terms of providing a range of flexibility to create just about any sort of level you could imagine. I've only shipped a couple levels so far, but I quickly set out to explore the idea of creating off-screen mechanisms that could drive more complex behaviors in your level than might be obviously possible with just the basic elements. You can see some of what I've done in my level Secret Code 1, which you can find here. So in this video, I wanted to start talking about some of the techniques and mechanisms that I came up with along the way. Those mechanisms revolve largely around the relay, an element that didn't immediately jump out at me as being particularly important. I saw it in the workshop and I thought, okay, so it receives a signal on this channel and it sends a signal on that channel. What's it really used for? Well, after a little thought, I realized that its most basic use was to create switching logic that was maybe a little more complex than otherwise possible. But it doesn't even scratch the surface of their true potential. So let's take a look at something more. Here we see three switches, and you might recognize that each of them has a different behavior configured. This first switch is a hold switch. It becomes active when we press it down, and if we let it up, it stops being active. The middle switch here is a toggle switch. When we touch it, it becomes active, but then it remains active until we come back and touch it again to make it inactive. And this third switch is a locking switch. When we touch it, its signal becomes active, and there's nothing short of dying or restarting a level that can make this switch stop being active at this point. So what if we want a single switch to control multiple receiving elements, but we want some of those receivers to see the switch like a hold switch, and some of them to see it like a toggle switch, and some of them to see it like a locking switch? When we hop on this switch, it sends a signal that activates all three of these signs, and then when we step back away, only the no sign folds back up. Now at this point I could have faked this much with just a temp switch and then hoped that nobody paid attention long enough to see the temp switch deactivate again. But if we hop on the switch again, we see that the question mark sign folds up and remains folded up when we walk away again. And we can do this with various sporadic timings to try to show that it would be a little crazy to try to fake this. So let's take a look at how it was done. The switch here is a simple push switch that sends its signal on channel 12. The no sign receives signals on channel 12, and it responds to the switch as it is, as a simple push switch. The yes sign receives signals on channel 13, and that's managed by these two relays here. The first relay also receives signals from the switch on channel 12. When all the signals on channel 12 are active, it places an active signal on channel 13. When the second relay sees any active signal on channel 13, it places an active signal, also on channel 13. At the start of the level, channels 12 and 13 are inactive. But then as soon as someone touches the switch and first makes channel 12 active, this relay makes channel 13 active. From that moment forward, this relay will keep himself active. He saw an active signal on channel 13, so he placed an active signal on channel 13. And then, even if channel 12 becomes inactive, he'll still see the active signal on channel 13 that he himself placed there. Channel 13 can never become inactive again. It behaves like a locking switch. Our sign, which looks for any active signal on channel 13, responds to the switch as though it were locking. This combination of relays can be described as a very simple memory unit, almost the simplest that you could build out of relays. In truth, this relay alone could be described as the memory unit. We could connect it directly to the switch, and then signs that receive all active signals from channel 12 would see it as a push switch, while signs that receive any active signal from channel 12 would see it as a locking switch. This does put some theoretical constraints on what the input can be. If you had multiple switches that feed into channel 12, then you might find that you had to push them off to some other channel to get the intended logic. And that's why I initially showed the device with a dedicated input channel and a separate feedback channel. Our toggling behavior is managed by these two devices. To understand these devices, we need to take a step back and think about how relays are evaluated. If you look at these combinations of channels, they might seem contradictory. This is no accident. Creating feedback loops between relays is a key concept. But the result may not seem obvious. In effect, the game will determine the active status of each relay once per frame. The technical details of how it does this aren't necessarily important. What we need to know is that it behaves as if each relay were updated once per frame, and within each frame, the relays are updated in a particular order. Left to right, top down, just like reading English text. I should mention, it may seem like we wouldn't want to depend on such a detail, lest it change and ruin our levels. I did ask around a bit on Discord, and one of the devs, well, he didn't go so far as to guarantee the behavior would never change, but he did clarify that it's rooted in more basic behavior of the game and is not expected to change. So, we can reasonably proceed with the understanding that if we have two relays, and each sends on the other's receiving channel, the one positioned higher up in the level, or to the left if they're on the same row, will receive the signal that the other relay sent last frame. The other relay will receive a signal that the first relay sends this frame, and a signal sent by the other relay will be received by the first relay next frame. So with this understanding of how relays are evaluated, we're ready to take a look at how these two devices work. Let's start with this one at the bottom, which is our toggle flag. You generally wouldn't attach a toggle flag directly to your switch, and we'll see why that is in just a minute. This one's configured with its input on channel 16 and its output on channel 15. The first relay looks at channel 16, the input, and if it sees that all signals there are active, then it places an active signal on channel 18. This second relay looks at channel 15, the output, and if all signals there are active, then it puts an active signal on channel 18. The third relay looks at channel 18, and if it sees exactly one active signal there, then it places an active signal on the output at channel 15. You can see that we've again set up a sort of feedback loop, this time between these two relays. In order for that feedback to work properly, it's important that nothing else in the level be configured to send on channels 15 or 18. Each toggle flag requires a dedicated feedback channel, channel 18 in this case, and also requires that its output channel be reserved for its exclusive use. If we need to combine this output signal with some other signal in the level, then additional relays are needed to forward it along. At the start of the level, channels 15 and 18 will both be inactive, and they'll stay that way until we see an active input signal. Once all signals on channel 16 become active, in the first frame, this first relay will put an active signal on channel 18. The second relay won't yet see an active signal on channel 15, so it won't put an active signal on channel 18. The third relay sees that there is exactly one active signal on channel 18 coming from this first relay, so it puts an active signal on channel 15, the output. In the next frame, if we assume that channel 16 is still active, then this first relay continues to put an active signal on channel 18. The second relay now sees the active signal from the previous frame on channel 15, so it also puts an active signal on channel 18. The third relay no longer sees exactly one active signal on channel 18, so it stops putting an active signal on channel 15. And this pattern will continue indefinitely. For every frame where all signals on the input are active, the output signal will change to the value opposite what it had in the previous frame, a toggle. On the other hand, if all signals on channel 16 are not active, then this first relay will stop putting an active signal on channel 18. The second relay will put an active signal on channel 18 if and only if the output value from the previous frame was active. And so the output will ultimately retain its value on any frame where the input was not active. If we connected this directly to our switch, then while the switch is active, we'd be continuously receiving that active signal and toggling the output back and forth every frame. The sign would just open and close very rapidly. And that's not the behavior that we want. What we need for this device to function properly is an input signal that pulses active just for one frame when the switch is first pressed. That's where this last device comes in. Its input is configured to our switch on channel 12. If all of the signals on channel 12 are active, then the first relay places an active signal on channel 16. If there are no active signals on channel 17, then the second relay places an active signal on channel 16. And then, if all of the signals on channel 12 are active, the third relay places an active signal on channel 17. Starting again with none of these channels active, the first frame on which we see an active signal on channel 12, this first relay will place an active signal on channel 16. The second relay will look at channel 17. Now it's evaluating before this third relay, so it's looking at the previous frame's output. In the previous frame, there was no active signal on channel 17, so this relay places an active signal on channel 16, so that for this frame, all the signals on channel 16 are active. Finally, the third relay sees that channel 12, all signals are active, so it places a signal on channel 17, which will be seen in the next frame. On frame 2, channel 12 might still be active, so this relay would then continue sending an active signal on channel 16. But since channel 17 was made active on the previous frame, this relay does not send an active signal on channel 16. On the second frame of activity for channel 12, it is no longer true that all of the signals on channel 16 are active. For the duration that channel 12 does remain active, channel 17 will remain active as well. This device can be thought of as an event emitter, simulating like a key down event on a switch, or also I sometimes think of it as an input buffer. Putting all the pieces together, when we connect our switch to our input buffer, and then connect our input buffer to our toggling flag, we create an assembly where each time you press the switch, the value of the toggling flag toggles. And so we've successfully created behavior like a toggling switch from what's really a push switch. I didn't use either of the two flag memory units that we just described in Secret Code 1, but I did make quite a bit of use of the event generator or input buffer devices, along with a number of other techniques that I'm planning to discuss in possible future videos. So if you found the information here useful or interesting and want to see more, please do let me know. In the meantime, this is Madelsberger. Good night.